Well, welcome to another episode of TJM. We're in my 1988 3.6 XJ40 and we're running it down to Centennial Park, which is just down the road here, and we'll hop out and we'll just do a walk around and tell you what I have learned over the last 20 years of playing these things, what to look out for when buying an XJ40. Jane is my 1988 XJ6, codename XJ40. Jane used to be Jane Doe, is because when we bought it, we had no idea where she came from. I bought it off EasyBay, paid $2,000 for her, but just from the half a dozen photos that came with Jane, I felt as though it was a pretty nice looking motor car, considering it was over 30 years old. So what we'll do is just have a little walk around, and what I look at, it's only from my experience of owning 20 odd these over the last 20 odd years. When I'm buying an XJ40, what to look at? Firstly, look at the body panels. Do they all line up? Look at the paint, all the obvious things. If they all line up, it looks pretty honest. It's a good start. Rust is the biggest problem with these things. They rust pretty much everywhere. And even Australian models can suffer serious rust if they're left outside and they're not looked after. Rust spots. First place I go to is here. The bottom of the window frame. Pretty much every XJ40 will have rust in that position, and this one is no exception. Obviously, I've treated that rust and just held it back with some rust converter, cleaned it out. It's not going to go any further, but I keep it open just so we know that's, keep an eye on it on both sides. That's a big deal. Also, other major rust spots that they always rust in. This is in the corners here. So just have a double check to make sure that they haven't had a bodgy repair. As you can see, mine never had rust in it. And the reason being is these rubbers underneath that corner there carry water, and the water sits there for days on end, eventually going through the paint and causing rust. Other hidden rust spots, and this is an important one. This lower plastic seal over the plenum chamber. Water ingresses under there and debris, and pretty much no one ever takes this cover off unless it's needed to come off because the windscreen wipers aren't working or something, or the rubbers aren't working. Water will sit in there for months on end and eventually rust under there and create holes in the top there, and that brings water into the cabin. It's a pretty easy fix, but you really want to make sure that there's no rust there, and ideally you can tell by that because you can smell cabin, the cabin's wet and the carpets are wet. You know you've got water ingressing from somewhere. Boot is also classic rust area, especially in the corners under the back there. They can rust. Just look everywhere. On UK cars, not so much as prevalent in Aussie, is the bonnet, under the bonnet, the firewalls. Everywhere these things can rust, and every car will be different. Check the boot. Oh, on a mess in there. Just make sure it's dry inside the boot, because there's numerous areas where water can ingress. Always check underneath the carpets. Make sure it's nice and dry, no rust under there. If you see rust under there, you know that this boot's taken in water. Where it takes in water is a couple of spots. Takes it, the rubbers perish in this Let's open this up. It's notorious for allowing water to get into your boot. It's only sealed by a little rubber thing, and then there's a little drain down there. But if there's got damage or cracks in that, water will come into your boot that way. If there's rust under those little quarter panels on the corner of the windscreen of your rear window, water will ingress your boot there. And another thing, I think there was a bulletin, a Jag bulletin, that water will move underneath that plastic seal there and goes through those little bolties there that weren't sealed up, and water will run down the back in there into the boot. And there's probably other places. I notice I have a little bit of rust in that corner there that I've got to really fix up later. It's another spot to look at, the corners around there. Always check the inside of your doors for rust. Common area down there. Make sure there's been no bodgy repairs. They should look like that with the seal around the outside. My XJ6 is the pauper pack. It's not a sovereign. Sovereigns have they call it fish tank headlights, whereas the XJ6 has got the quads. Back in late '93, they ended up all putting the quad headlights, and they discontinued with the square fish tanks, obviously because of looks. Not a lot of people actually did like them. The difference between a sovereign and this model, besides the headlights, the chrome around the top of the window frames is got the sovereigns, but these have got the blacked out. Back in 1988, the sovereign would have come with hydraulic leveling suspension. Pretty much, I don't think any XJ40 would still have the leveling suspension in it, and it was that bad. Even Jaguar put out a bulletin telling them how to convert it back to coilovers for the back suspension. What else? The XJ6 could have been with, it was all basically, getting running over here. You could opt up, like if you bought the base model with no options, you wouldn't even get air conditioning in it. So you could tick all the boxes if you wanted to opt this thing up for a to the specs of the sovereign version. In fact, I did have one in black many years ago. It was an '88 XJ6, but it was opt up to the degree where it was pretty much a sovereign. It even had a 5-speed manual gearbox in it, and it had the quad headlights as well. The 3.6s and even the later models are notorious for breaking door handles, and people just get too heavy duty with them. After a while, the little nylon bushes wear on inside of the linkages, and it makes it harder for the to pull that handle to release the latch. At the end of the day, they start pulling it at extreme pressure, and they snap the really poor casting brackets inside the doors, and especially on the 3.6s, they're very, very hard to get. Early models came out with a 390mm metric, which didn't really catch on. You won't find too many with the metric wheels on them these days because the tyres are just, I don't even know if you can still get them. So most of them have been changed to imperial size wheels. These particular wheels on mine are off a X300. It originally had the steel wheels on it when I bought it with hubcaps. Doors should have no wear on the hinges, so just lift the driver's door up and down to see if there's any movement. If there's no movement, that's always a good sign that it hasn't had too much wear. The rear lenses on the taillights, they always seem to crack and fade. And mine on my XJ6, probably really no exception, except I've given them a little light spray with nightshade just to darken them up. It also just covers up those little fading cracks that you can get. Check all your bumpers, make sure they all line up correctly. Over the time you'll find that I've had a few bangs and dings and that, and these little, you can see mine there, it's still in place, but they're only plastic brackets that hold those corners on. and they can definitely get damaged. Don't forget to check your rear shocks and front shocks. They should not, they should just bounce up to one bounce and not go up and down. It should look fairly level on the ground, front and rear. Mine sits nicely. The AJ6 engines are pretty much bulletproof as long as they've been serviced correctly over their lives. I've known head gaskets to blow, especially on the 4 litres. Brakes are probably the biggest issue of early 40s because it's got this hydraulic system in it without the booster. The pressure spheres run out of gas. Eventually they're replaceable, a little bit difficult to replace. ABS issues happen all the time with them. If the car stops and just doesn't move and breaks down and there's no electrics, you'll find it's generally just the amplifier that sits under the coil there. It'll be the pickup on the flywheel. They're easy replaced and not too expensive. Washer bottles, generally you'll find that that's got a leak in it and they're a bitch to replace. Later models come with thermatic fans. Mine's got the original old one. Obviously check your oils. Your auto oil, have a little look at the colour, make sure it's nice and pink like mine is, and have a sniff of it, make sure it doesn't smell burnt. Open your cap. These get a little bit of condensation up the top there, and it looks like there might be water like that. You can see there does have a little bit of condensation in there, but that's quite normal. I really should clean it. The later models will have the oil filler cap on that tappet cover. High milers can also have tappet noises in them, and that's a fairly expensive job to actually have to replace the lifters and tappets. When you crank the engine, just make sure there's no dip in the compressions, because you could have a burnout valve. A good way when you're inspecting the car is just, I like to just pull out the coil distributor and just crank it a few times and make sure that cranking sounds nice and easy. If you hear one drop, you know you've got a burnt out valve or something's going on with one of those pistons. If you also find your wipers don't work on the delay, there's a inline fuse underneath this kick panel that you won't find in your wiring diagram, and it was put in afterwards because what was happening was the wiper motors were burning out over in the UK during winter time because the wiper itself was freezing against the windscreen, and they turned the wipers on. The motor wouldn't go because it was stuck to the blade was stuck to the windscreen, and it would burn the motors out. So to prevent that happening, they've put an inline fuse. I think it's a yellow wire in there that's pretty easy to get to, but either that or the little micro switch in the motor itself will be the problem. This green bottle's the hydraulic reservoir for the brakes, and it contains this green special Castrol hydraulic fluid that it's pretty hard to get now, and you have to have a special filling thingo to fill up that reservoir, and they're impossible to get, so you've got to actually make a special fitting if you want to top that thing up. And there's a little warning gauge. If you see the red there, you'll know that that reservoir is low, and it's a mineral oil. It's Castrol mineral oil. You can still buy it, but not the correct stuff with the filler that fills that special cap up. And one thing we should look for when you're buying one of these, especially in the 4 litre mode, is try and get to the car and start it first thing cold. The 4 litres, I haven't seen too much on the 3.6s, tend to get worn out valve stem oil seals. They get hard. If the car sits overnight, oil drips into the cylinders, and the only way you can tell whether that's the issue is you'll get blue smoke puff out early in the mornings. Inside, do we smell damp? If you smell damp, it's leaking water. So make sure you check under all your carpets. Why is it leaking water? Well, there's numerous reasons. As mentioned earlier, you could have some rust underneath that plastic plinth underneath the plenum chamber. Or it could be even worse than that. Chamber down there, that's your intake for your air, gets a lot of debris in it. See, those little gauzes are not all that fine. And over the years, you get the dirt and gauze and water. There's only one drain to let all that out, and that's like a duckbill drain down there. You can't see it. And when that blocks up, this chamber fills with water and it will overflow into your heater motors. And once you get water in those heater motors, in typical Jaguar style, inside the heater motors there's the open motor, and there's the relay and the diodes that make the whole thing work. And once they get water in them, that's the end of them. They'll rust, and it's a fairly big job to have to pull all them out. So check for smells of water. Air conditioning, pretty much you have a few issues with them. These early models, they're not a Dell Air system. I think they're a Nippon Denso, correct me. I think they're a Japanese system in the XJ40s from the old Dell Air systems. What can go wrong with them? Okay, first of all, if the system's completely dead, that could be just minor. There's a micro switch that operates this fan here, and they sometimes seize up or break. They're a pretty easy fix. The micro switches you can get, if you can't fix the old one, you can get them from any electrical place for a couple of bucks. They're just a common thing. Check that all your vents work. Make sure that you get nice fresh air out of your center vents, because if they're closed, it means that your vacuums or your lines are not working correctly. So just check all that air conditioning, make sure it's cold. Compressors are relatively cheap, but to put a new one in with the labour and then to have to regas it, the cost of that builds up. Leather, in our Australian conditions, things do dry up. And what annoys me the most, if the leather starts to shrink, it pulls the piping together and you get this corrugated look along the piping. I hate the look of these. Mine are okay, they're not perfect, but it is 34 years old. I have some cracking down there on the armrest, but that sort of doesn't bother me. I can fix that pretty easy. I just haven't done it. In most of these early models, these door cards would have been off numerous times repairing door locks, etc. So just ensure that all the clips and that are in place and they fit nicely. Instrument clusters are notorious for playing up. Generally, something won't be working on it. This one's not too bad, but my odometer is like Groundhog Day. It gets to 1,000 kilometres and goes back to 0. And so I really don't know how many kilometres this thing's done. I'm only judging it by its wear and tear. My guess it's high 100,000s. Who knows? Not the original steering wheel. As you can see, I hate the XJ40 early steering wheels. I think they're the most ugliest steering wheel in the world. This is one I just had in the garage. It's a Momo wheel timber. Sort of suits the car. I'm quite nice, happy and dry with it. Oh, crash pad. Make sure there's no cracks in that. You'll find if there is, they're a bloody hard job to pretty much pull the whole. Not like the old Series 1, 2 and 3, you can just a couple of bolts and pull it off. You've got to pull the whole thing apart. The instrument cluster comes out easy. It's only a few bolts under there and this whole thing comes off. Got to take the steering wheel off. Speakers on the 3.6, there's 6 speakers, one on each door, and there's 2 on underneath the seats down there. And they're only, they're not a 6-inch, but you can actually squeeze 6-inch speakers down there. So you'll find, generally, if they haven't been replaced by now, they're knackered and you'll need to replace them. I find the plastics pretty poor after 34 years. They start to get brittle. My both sunshades were broken and the little holders were also broken. You can buy these, but they're pretty expensive to get the Jag ones. So I just nicked a couple of second-hand Commodore ones and they fit and do nicely. And the little plastic bracket that was broken in there, I just put a little bit of steel rod with a little bit of araldite and they hold just nicely. So you can tidy them up without having to do too much expense. There's also some great books you can get before you buy a 40, just so you can read up on them. I love this one. This is a Haynes book, and it's pretty much just enjoying and buying a 40. They're pretty easy to get on EasyBay, but there's plenty of coloured photos and gives you a good history of the car. Another one's this little Essential Buyer's Guide book by Peter Crispin. It's also a good little book, goes through all the things you should be looking for when you buy one. Hope you enjoyed this little video of my perspective of what you should be looking for when buying an XJ40. It's not a mechanic's view, it's not an expert's view, it's just my view. They're the things that I've learned to know about these things. There's probably more I've forgotten, but it's a good start for an entry level, and if you want to make any comments or questions down below, just do so and see if I can answer them. So thanks very much for watching all, and don't forget to give the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, just press that handsome bloke down there somewhere. He'll look after you, and see you guys. Catch you next time.